Welcome everybody at our Atelier for Arts and Production Managers, targeting participants from MENA, Balkan and Mediterranean, supported by Drossos Foundation, Art Link Sukak Theatre Company Elefsis 2023, and made possible with the support also of Creative Europe. I'm delighted to welcome here today with us Dijana Milošević from that theater in Serbia, Hooman Nassimi from New Faces in the Netherlands, Ellada and Evangelou from the Buffer Fringe festivals, and both Dijana and Ellada also make part of the leadership circle Impact, who is looking into mitigating conflict through the role of arts. And finally, but not at least, Ahmed Tobasi, Artistic Director of the Freedom Theatre in Palestine. They will tackle the topic of the role of festivals and arts organizations in general with contemporary issues, gender-based violence, inequality, racism, social cohesion, decolonization and post-conflict. So happy to have you with us. The panel will be facilitated by Mike van Graan. So over to you, Mike.
Thanks very much, Inga. And just now we were saying the topic is very much about the whole kitchen sink and how do festivals kind of address all of these major issues. Part of the discussion yesterday in one of the panels was about the pressures that are brought to bear upon the arts and culture sector to deliver on things that other sectors of society are unable to deliver on, and yet the arts are kind of expected to meet particular things. At the same time, we recognize that festivals do not happen in vacuums. They take place in very real social, political, economic circumstances and are impacted upon by these circumstances, and festivals in turn have an opportunity to impact on those circumstances as well. So the panel this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, is really about interrogating these questions, asking how may we go about addressing these things in ways that are authentic, in ways that are responsible, that aren't simply to tick a box, that aren't simply about pleasing some funding agency and the like. So really delighted to have such a fantastic panel with us, coming from very different circumstances, to interrogate these questions with us. And we'll go in the order. Each of them will have about 10-12 minutes to speak to the subject. We will then facilitate a conversation with the panelists and take questions from our participants as well as people who might be watching this live stream. So we're going to start off with Hooman, and he's going to be followed by Dijana, and then we'll have Ellada, and then finally Ahmed from Freedom Theatre in Palestine. Hooman, great to see you again.
Good morning, Mike.
Go ahead.
Nice to see you. Shall I just kick off?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Good night, depending where you are right now in the world. I hope you are doing well. My name is Hooman Nassimi. I run Society in Motion, a social enterprise in the Netherlands. The project I'm going to talk to you about today is New Faces, and I hope you see the link in my name, newfaces.ngo, is where you will find a practical guide in English and in Dutch about how to include newcomers in your organization. When I say newcomers, I mean asylum seekers, people who already have a status. So just a broad term that is less politically loaded in that sense, and how to involve them in your organization, both as personnel, but also as the public. These are the kind of two spheres that we work. In the Netherlands, I've worked with about 10, 20, 30 culture organizations looking at that question, and every culture organization, small, big, music, theater, literary, any type you can imagine, has their own way and their own approach of working with newcomers. Mostly it starts as working with newcomers as volunteers, or having them as part of the audience, since they've been living here in the Netherlands for a long time. But obviously for you, dear colleagues that are here now from the Mediterranean, these are different situations. Western Europe is dealing and has a different context in dealing with newcomers than broader parts of the Mediterranean. When I think about Greece, when I think about Cyprus, these are obviously different contexts, and those also need different kinds of solutions and ways of approaching them. But what they all have in common is the urgency in dealing with newcomers, because the urgency is always the same. Issues that newcomers face is obviously, besides the basic needs So obviously, having been given asylum or being in asylum procedure, having access to education, and having access to clean water, and right now during COVID, obviously medical care. If we don't look at those things, but if we look at the things that something that unites all the newcomers in the world is obviously access to culture, and the massive isolation that newcomers face in every part of the world when they are new in a country, when they're still waiting in a procedure, or if they've been given already status. No matter, isolation is always the biggest issue, and the lack of network that you have. Here in the Netherlands, we kind of have this attitude that when you're looking for a new job, you just call up one of your colleagues and you say, hey, let's drink a coffee. And then the next person is going to direct you towards somebody else, and you're going to drink a lot of coffees. And at some point, you're going to end up with a new job. Or if you're going to move, you're going to call up your friends and ask them to move some couches. But obviously, that's the power of the network that we have. And that's something that newcomers don't have access to because they are new in a different country. And oftentimes, through myriad government ideas, they are put into places where there's a clear distinction and there's a clear barrier for them to have access to society in a broader way. There's obviously a lot of misinformation. There's fear of the unknown, right? So all of these things don't really help us to work with newcomers and to integrate them. But that's exactly where the urgency comes into play. And that's where I think cultural sectors and the cultural organizations that we have are the most innovative, the most, they are in the best position to deliver really impactful results, to be leaders in showing the rest of society. And as Mike put it as well, which was fantastic, taking on tasks that a lot of other organizations, and especially governmental organizations, can't handle. They don't face them, or they can't handle them. They don't provide innovative solutions or adequate solutions even oftentimes to these serious issues. So culture organizations have then the task of doing a million things at the same time, and also feeling the social responsibility, as I can imagine a lot of you feel, to deal with exactly these kinds of urgencies that you see in society. But I mean, besides the urgency part, it's very good, obviously, to work with newcomers, but why would you do that, right? So that's also an interesting question. Simply because, and this is very boring for me to say, but diversity really leads to innovation. So having people with different backgrounds, different ways of thinking, different perspectives, different understanding of your programming really helps you to dive differently into the kinds of people that you want to reach, but also different perspectives that you can get and different insights you can provide to your usual audience. I had this music festival, Amsterdam Dance Event in Amsterdam, where the programmers briefly met with newcomers who were experiencing their program, and they got so many different insights from just how the newcomers saw the programming, experienced it, and compared it to their own home countries, because they were all artists that participated. So that made them really think differently about the usually Western kind of audience that they have, and gave them new ideas about how to prepare for the future, become future-proof, right? Being in a cultural sector is competitive. You need to move year from year, be really cutting edge with your programming, your personnel, your ideas, the way you attract people, the way you attract funding as well, which is why then working with newcomers and getting that kind of new perspectives and getting these new ideas will lead to innovation. But also having newcomers as an audience is obviously a way that you can diversify your own programming and reach people in different ways. Let me give you some concrete examples on how I've helped to facilitate working with newcomers with other festivals. We had some music festivals on the Dutch islands, where we had, I think, about 50 or 100 newcomers participating as volunteers. And I had a lot of fear to put them on boats to go to the islands, and then to spend their time for about 2 weeks in tents during rain and weather, participating at festivals. And first of all, what is a volunteer? If you're from Syria, if you're from North Africa, volunteering is a concept that is so vague that it is often non-existent. And then secondly, also my own assumptions about boats and all of these connotations that come up into your mind. And then working to schedule, you know, being on time, being very Dutch in that sense as well. How is it going to work out? And it was very scary, but afterwards it was completely fine. So that also means that a lot of assumptions that we have and a lot of protectiveness that we feel towards people that we want to involve in our own organizations is sometimes just also in assumptions that we have to work through with the people that we want to involve. Because the newcomers that we had, all of them were on the boats, on the top deck, taking pictures of the sea, taking selfies, sending it to their friends. The tents were something, yeah, they were a little bit uncomfortable, but nobody compared it to other situations where they've been in previously because of the atmosphere there was so much energy, there was so much embracefulness towards all the other people that were at the festival, just the usual visitors, the usual volunteers, and that is the best way to connect people. This whole trajectory is about ontmoeting, is about getting to know each other. Because if you get to know each other on the same eye level, if you get to connect with people that you don't see as refugee or you don't see as your boss or whatever, if you're just two people listening to music, or if you're just two people doing volunteer work together, cleaning out gutters or preparing something, you are human. And then you can connect on the topics that all of us are connected on in this world, which is, I think the best acronym for this is FORD. So family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. These are concepts that are universally existent in any culture. And if you can talk about these kinds of concepts, you really get to connect and you really get over the fear of the unknown, you get over the stereotypes, you get over these kinds of things, and you can get to build a network with which you then can grow from. So again, this is the network where I was talking about earlier for newcomers, which is so urgent. And going into the Mediterranean context, this is something that I hope to pick up with you when we have our one-on-ones, because I did some additional research on this. And obviously there are different ideas and different concepts that need to be taken in mind when it comes to these topics. In general, it just works out really well if you get to know each other in an informal context and get to build your story from there. One last example that I'm going to give is the very first time that I did this was at a festival called Welcome to the Village in Leeuwarden in Netherlands. And there were these two guys in front of me walking, and they were talking about their experiences coming to the Netherlands and talking about how they were stuck at the Greek border and where there was massive rain every day. And just these, you know, horrible circumstances that they were in. But they were talking about it kind of nonchalantly and saying like, oh, yeah, did you have to move your tent as well so many times because of the rain and the mud and these kinds of things? And the other guy said like, yeah, but now I really know how to set up a tent quickly. So now I can actually help Dutch people setting up their tents while they're at the festival. So how crazy is it that sometimes life prepares you for random situations and give you these kinds of skill sets that you never would have thought about using again in a completely different context that is so positive, that is so connected. Even 3 years, 4 years on, people are still in touch with the people they've volunteered together, and the connections that they've made are lifelong. I think that's a good word to end on. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that very stimulating kind of provocation. And you know what he was saying is just resonates so much in terms of people who might have particular kind of experiences with which they have bad associations in another kind of context. That experience is completely different. So being on a boat as a refugee, fleeing someplace, living in a tent for a while is very different to being in a festival where you go there by boat and you live in a tent. And so context matters, you know, and I think that that's a beautiful illustration of how things can change and the extent to which context does really matter. So thank you very much, Hooman. It's been great. Dijana, look forward to hearing you.
Hello to all. It is my pleasure really to take part in this very important conversation. Thank you for inviting me. I'm artistic director of DAH Theater based in Belgrade in Serbia. and Dach means breath, or it means Hades, the Greek underworld, if you read it the opposite way. And so all these meanings go for our theater and our artistic collective. We exist for 30 years, and in the course of those 30 years, we created several festivals. And the reason for creation, the festivals in general, was first of all the need, of course, to focus and to point to certain issues that are important to ourselves and our community, but also to connect with the among each others and internationally, and also to celebrate, because the meaning of the, if you go to the etymology of the word festival, it is festum in Latin, it means celebration. And so I deeply believe that we need also to celebrate together. So these are the festivals that we created also were for. But this time I would like to focus specifically on the last festival we realized and produced, and this is something that we intend to continue with in the future, hopefully once a year. This was the festival that happened the last year in October, the Arts and Human Rights Festival. That was the first festival of that kind in my country. And just to give a little bit of the context is that we live in the so-called country in transition, country that went through the very violent civil war in 90s, and then in the 2000s we went through lots of turbulences with assassination of the first democratically elected prime minister and so on. And today we live in the very challenged society on different levels, with a big restriction of media freedom, freedom of speech, and so on and so on. And so we felt that it was necessary to address those issues, but not also only to address them, but to contribute to the creation of the culture of human rights. Because actually what we lack here, and I think locally, but also I can say internationally, is the whole culture of human rights, which implies the knowledge of people, what are their rights, how they are violated, what to do in that case, how to nurture the culture of human rights, and so on and so on. And then we believe deeply in the power of art and the theater specifically to deal with the very sensitive questions for the community and for the society, because as we all know, I guess here, art has this unique power to bring people together, to address wounds, to help to make invisible issues and in people that are invisible visible, to address contradiction, to live in the contradiction, to put adversary sides together, and so on. And this is what we felt, that this is exactly the role of, could be the role of our festival, Arts and Human Rights. This is something very new in my country, but we wanted from the start to create international festival where we would invite different artists who their work deal with these issues. What happened was a global pandemic, COVID, and then we had literally during the planning phase of the festival to redesign the festival and the idea, and we focused on the local artists, which in fact happened to be as a great outcome of the festival, like almost as the strategy that we should have thought about at the first place, to give really the possibility to local artists to create their work, to connect, and also to become aware that what they do is actually within the realm of the human rights through their art. Because also we met many artists nationally, internationally, that are doing the art that is in the field of the conflict transformation, peace building, human rights, and so on, but in fact they never identified like that. And so we also felt that it is very important to spread the idea of the field or even ecosystem that we at Impact are talking about, that there is the whole field today of artists and people from different fields and experts that are working together for the conflict transformation using arts. The festival happened the end of the October, and we were having like almost kind of the crazy race with pandemic. In our country, the numbers were not that bad. The situation was much better than in many other countries. At some period, it was the let's say best situation in the region, and we decided to try to create the live festival, because we were of course aware that many of our colleagues had to go online. And it was very important in the times of isolations to create something live where people could really meet in person. And of course, we took all measures and precautions, and we were very aware what is the context of pandemic. But at the same time, we thought that basically, despite the circumstances, we as artists had to do the step further and to try to create the conditions that would enable us to meet. So the festival happened live, but also partially online, and that was, so I could say that what is something that we practice in our work, we apply to the festival, and this is working with obstacles. Because obviously we had this huge obstacle that was pandemic, and also an obstacle of the virtual space, because as theater artists, I was very suspicious about the use of the virtual space for the theater art that is basically in its essence, I mean, the meaning of it is really live contact. And then we used both of those obstacles in a way as our allies. And so this is something that I would like to basically share, to maybe inspire that, yes, there are obstacles, but instead of like giving up or banging our heads, on the obstacle, we can we can use the obstacle as a situation where we can create new strategies and maybe find new answer. So this is what we did, and the festival really went very well. It lasted for 6 days, and it presented different kinds of arts, from visual theater, concerts, lots of talk, lots of meetings, and so on. And the feedback of the audience really was crucially important to us, because we didn't know would people come to live events, obviously, but people were coming. The events were filled with audiences, and they were leaving the festival telling us that they felt encouraged and inspired. And after so many months of isolation and not being able to be in touch really with others, that the festival provided the space for that. So I could say that what we really got as an insight from this festival is that we live in the world where we need really to think about connections, and how do we connect, and how we connect despite the circumstances, and how we create the conditions for that. And then another maybe let's say insight again is that it was also crucially important to connect internationally. And this is, of course, the good side of technology, that we could be in touch so much these days, and that the borders that are so visible on so many levels right now, whole Europe and basically worldwide, could be treated as again, as an obstacle that we could work with. We, as I said, we intend to continue with the festival. Finances are very unstable. We are still battling here to explain to authorities why it is important, and also we are very aware that our authorities do not want this kind of the free discourse and the creation of the free space for thinking. But nevertheless, we believe that the basic united need for this space that was created through the festival would prevail, and that we shall go on with it. And so I would just like to say for the end that it was very important in our country. We are still fighting a lot for the LGBT so on rights, and it was important to present those kinds of works very publicly. And it was incredible really to see people changing on the spot, changing their minds, changing their ideas and so on. And so that was extremely beneficial. Another very important point, and I think it's international need right now, was that we presented the incredible international project about trafficking of women, and this is something that is happening worldwide, and people do not understand the scope and the mechanism of it and so on. It was the live testimony by the woman from Serbia who was trafficked to Holland, and she was there for 2 years, and then she managed to escape, and then she found her way to talk about that experience through the arts, and this is what we presented. And it was like the mind opening for many people that came from all these kind of limited ideas about this kind of crime and tragedy that is happening. So these were just 2 examples. We presented many kinds of different works because this was the idea to go very broadly. So later, if there is time, I can speak more about that. But for now, thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Dijana. And as you say, what the online space does allow in terms of making these international connections is that here we are connecting with each other without having had to apply for visas. So we're all able to be in this space at least, and that's something to be thankful for. Exactly. So thank you very much for that. And now we're going to go on to Ellada. Ellada, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Mike. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're well. Very excited to be here in your midst. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the work that we do at the Buffer Fringe Performing Arts Festival. So I've been the artistic director of the festival for the past 2 years. And let's just say that the past year was a bit of an adventure. So I'd like to start with a story. So last year, an artist that was approved, who was approved for the festival through the open call, we will call him Artist X, in March was collaborating with an artist from the other side of the island. So in the process, when the pandemic started, the checkpoints closed between the 2 sides of the island. So these artists could no longer work together. And because of the kind of fluctuating situation and, all the factors that could not be controlled, the artist from the other side could no longer collaborate. So Artist X was found alone. So when Artist X agreed to perform on both sides of the divide, in the north and in the south of the island, Artist X had to rehearse and to perform, needed to take a PCR test every time he crossed, needed to renew his PCR test every 24 hours. And also Artist X was from district, so he needed to find a place to stay because between the districts there was no moving around. So he needed to find a place to stay in the district in Nicosia, where the festival took place. So, and also Artist X had pre-existing conditions. Yet Artist X at the end performed work on both sides of the island, in the north and in the south, and he has the PCR test to show for it. But I wanted to talk about this condition that was created in 2020 that in so many ways has come to, let's say, magnify to broader contexts that are both on the symbolic but also on the very practical level. And I'm taking this from the title of the plenary. So one is this idea of how is it that we continue to have colonizing practices within our own island. And on the other hand, how we are still going through this, we are in a post-conflict, a post-frozen conflict situation. And the question goes back to the festival. What is the role of the festival in this situation? And how can we facilitate the work of artist X, who is from Cyprus, but also the work of artists that come from abroad, if they can, the work of artists that engage in kind of collaborative work, the work of artists that they choose to go through a process where they need the support of an institution. So I wanted to talk a bit about, to start a bit with the circumstances that Mike mentioned. And these circumstances are very important, I believe, as a festival to acknowledge before you even go into the idea, before you go into the curation of the festival itself. And one thing that I think that is required in this type of space is to be very careful about how it is that you proceed with your own fundraising. So there is the prospect of the enforcement of conflict, of the enforcement of divisions may occur through conflict if, for example, one chooses to be associated with funding from specific funders, maybe from state or from different agencies. So like one issue that I would like to raise is to be very strategic about who it is, the organizations and the entities that would support the festival. So you would have the type of freedom and the type of space to be able to say, yes, this is an island-wide festival. And there are no, and the geographic scope and the geographic reach will be wide. And having said that, I need to say that the Buffer Fringe is a festival that is amongst the very few that actually are island-wide. Festivals in Cyprus either take place in the south or take place in the north. But as a festival, if one is to commit, even in the time of a pandemic, to present its work on both sides of the island, then one needs to be very strategic in fundraising. There needs to be also a very clear understanding and a very clear agenda from the festival itself relating to the position of the festival within the social and political environment. So to be a peace building festival or to be a conflict resolution festival is one thing, and it does place a festival within specific frameworks. The understanding, though, that a festival can be supportive of social justice, can be supportive of democratizing creative processes, is a much more inclusive framing. And these are the types of approaches that we've been very consciously drawing towards. So I think it's a matter of shifting the conversation to rhetoric and to types of expressing one's mission that are closer to making festivals based on equal opportunities and human rights, and acknowledging the right of every artist and every audience member to have access to creation processes and to the present and to seeing art and artworks. So I want to touch on a couple of more points, and then I'm going to close off. But in terms of the idea of decolonizing and how festivals such as ourselves in spaces that are very clearly post-colonial, how does that translate in actual practice? And I think that has to do to a great extent with the collaborations that a festival engages to have with. So we are, for example, very happy to be engaging with the Impact platform for arts, culture, and conflict transformation. And the reason is because this idea of the gaze, of how it is that outside agents and agencies, both relating to the formulation of agendas and to funding and fundraising, this gaze within on a festival and on an entity that is very local and localized in a very contested space. It's something that can limit a festival, that can limit the activities of a festival. And that can return, unfortunately, to colonizing practices. And what is a colonizing practice? It's the expectation of a collaborator to see specific types of artwork. It's the expectation of a collaborator to have this idea of social justice or within a festival in Cyprus to be a specific type of narrative. So the decolonizing practice is basically allowing the institution itself and the artists to free the narratives. So you open it up. You open it up by creating, in our case, a conversation around it. And practically what we did in 2020, we asked our artists to document their creative processes. So we built a blog. It's bufferfringe.org, and I can share that link later. So on bufferfringe.org, we asked our artists to share with us their works and how the progress of the work went forward. In that way, we shared the thinking and the background and all of those elements that we hope will enrich a conversation, create a community which is more critical towards these narratives and towards the work and towards the community and society themselves, because we can actually follow what has been happening. We can converse with the artists. So we believe that this type of opening up the process, the artistic process to the public is both democratizing, but in our case, it can also serve to decolonize the practice. Not to have the expectation and the specific reading on what it is, the type of artwork that one thinks that they're seeing. And to kind of wrap up and say, I think at the end of the day, and also given all the challenges that we've had in 2020, we're still facing in 2021 with the pandemic, I think that the obligation of the work that should be done by festivals is to, as Hooman said, and I completely agree with that, is to show the type of versatility that government and government states and institutions, like larger institutions, cannot. And I think that that will maintain it will maintain our commitment towards sharing this space with the artists, because it's not our space, it's a space to share. So instead of kind of holding the reins and saying, this is me, to continue to open up the conversation of, okay, so let's think, let's regroup, what can we do now? You know, that type of versatility is so important. We do hope that we'll be able to maintain it also in 2021. So that's it from me. Very open to your questions. Thank you.
Great, Ellada. What an important point you make about using art to catalyze conversations. That, in fact, that's part of the decolonization process. That, you know, historically we've been brought up to believe that when you go to the theater, you sit in silence and you absorb, because you are, you know, watching something happen through the fourth wall, as it were. And then you leave the theater and you might talk about it, but that's it. You've had your access to art, and now you go off and do something else. And that's something that we've been inculcated with because of us assuming the values of how we appreciate or deal with or engage with art. But what you're talking about is that that's just the beginning of a process in terms of changing minds and changing the way that people think about things, that art is a catalyst towards greater conversations. So thank you very much for that. And now our final speaker, Ahmed, the Freedom Theatre in Palestine's Artistic Director.
Good morning, everybody from Palestine.
Hello.
Smile, please, smile. You look so serious. Thank you for this invitation. I think each speaker deserves to have a special episode about their experience. I don't know what I'm gonna say in 10 minutes. Like, I need 3 days to talk about what we try to do. But I will try. It's a new challenge for me. And I hope the art and artists will not continue through these screens. It's very noisy, it's very provocative, and I'm bored of it. And I miss the actual meeting with people. And I hope as an artist, we will not give up that easily to just set a link on Zoom and discuss our art and future work. I think in the Freedom Theater, we have many different productions that really can talk about all these kind of subjects. And in the beginning, I hope anyone here more interested to know more, want to discuss more, I will try to be able to meet, and we really can have a meeting, speech, whatever, together, discuss our work. But in this kind of time, I think the question is about the art and artists is really, can we continue in this kind of situation? And if the audience cannot come to us, how we can go to the audience? And I'm not talking about technology still, how we can make a theater, festivals and actions for the audience face to face. Because for me, it's a big question. If art and theaters cannot do anything in this kind of situation, then we need to stop and we rethink again about art and artistic work. For us in the Freedom Theater, the whole idea is about conflict, and it starts from conflict, a conflict in different levels, as a personal conflict, identity conflict, a political conflict. And all that starts from Giuliano and his mother, Arna Merkhamis. Arna Merkhamis, she's an Israeli Jew. She was part of the Israeli army. She served in the Israeli army. But when she finds the truth and find what is going on, she decided to stop serving in the army and then became an activist for the Palestinian rights. And she got a Nobel Prize, alternative Nobel Prize. And she opened a children's houses in the camp, where in the first intifada they closed the schools, and then the children were sitting in the streets, writing, reading. So in the way I'm trying to focus on the community and the power of the community around you. If you can win the community, then all your work will be much easier, will be much stronger, will be more effective in different level. And in that time, they opened the children's houses, and then the children, we had the only place in that time where children can go. And then the second intifada, most of these kids became armed resistance leaders, and most of them dead. So in the second intifada, Giuliano, the son of Arna, came, checked, and he made a documentary. I hope everyone can see it on YouTube. It's called Arna's Children. It explained a lot about the Freedom Theater and the journey of the Freedom Theater. And in 2002, in the invasion, when the Israeli invaded the whole West Bank, they destroyed the stone theater in that time. The stone theater is because the Palestinians were fight with a stone in the second intifada, so we call it the stone theater. And then in 2005, the people gathered together, 3 founders. One of them was one of these children, and he became Al-Aqsa Brigade leader in the whole West Bank, and he became wanted #1 for the Israeli army, and they tried to kill him many times, Zakaria Zubeidi, and he was believing in the role of art and culture to resist and explain about our story. So, you know, in West, when people hear about a freedom fighter, they think about the big beard, big belly, and 4 wives with 40 children. But when they meet Zakaria, they found out it's a young man who lives in culture beside the gun and resistance. So in that time we opened, and then we used theater for resistance. Me, myself, I was an armed resistance, and I've been in prison for 4 years. But then I lost my own friends, houses, and I believed it should be another way to fight. The idea is not to die. The idea is to resist and stay alive as long as you can to tell your story. And then we met in the theater, and I decided I want to resist through theater. And from that, being a Palestinian young person, he need a hospital and therapy to talk. I became an artist, and people listen to me and watch my performance and pay my tickets. And I say whatever I want in the theater, on the stage, and they still call me artist, which is a big different picture. So yeah, from that time, we start to talk about our stories, resist, and through theater, the first time I see Zionism got provoked and stand in front of the theaters to close our play. I never saw Israelis that provoke and they didn't know what to do. But through theater, they came and gathered in front of the theater to close our play. And for me, this is resistance. When your enemy, when the other side got out of control, that means you're resisting. And from that, we discover there is many different occupations. It's not just the Israeli occupations. We have our community occupations, the schools, the children's, the right of women, and we start to make programs for each one of these cases to fight it. Now we have a lot of enemies. Our relation to our community is love and war. When we make a play talks about something they like, something they love, they will love us. But when we talk about the right of women, the right of children, the sexual identities, they will put us in the target, and then they will start to fight us. Sometimes they shoot on the theater, sometimes they throw a bomb in the theater, sometimes they destroy the equipment of the theater, but we are happy with that because we knew it's making some provocative for the community. We have different programs from theater school to the professional company, to the programs of women, to the programs of children. Each one of them has a yearly program in somehow, including the performance for each program. We had the Freedom Bus, where we have a bus of activism, people from inside, from outside, international people, artists, journalisms. They come with us. We travel 10 days from Jenin, and we go all the way through the sea areas, which is a very difficult areas because, you know, Palestinian territories have divided between A area, B area, C area, and it's very complicated. You need to get to know that alone. I don't have time in this 12 minutes. I will try to, you know, jump. So we go with artists, we meet with people, we try to help them. Like some examples, some areas we bring water for them because they don't have water. The Israeli don't allow them to have water. They suck all the wheels water. Some of areas they don't have a place for children to study, like a kindergarten or a school. So we build a room for them. Some places don't have a library where they can read books. Some of areas they don't have trees. We bring trees and we plant them. But always it's very difficult. And then when we live with them, we do something with them. We became part of this area. We make a night of a festival, a small festival with music, playback theater, and the most important, to listen to their stories. So we ask them to tell the stories, and then we re-perform it for them in the playback method, so they can, we support them in this way. They will get more power to stay in these areas. We listen to their stories, we share their stories, and then we meet them to the next year to support them and more and more. And in our theater school, we also have our students. They are not just coming in the sake of art. They are a personal different persons have a different issues that they can't share with their families, they can't share with their friends. And when they come to theater school, we start with the personal story. For 3 months, we work in the personal story to bring them to face your problems, your questions, your issues, and then you will be able to become a performer and talk about all these kind of cases. We have many shocking stories that people, if they know them, they know what the power of art and theater can make for people. It's not, theater for us is not entertainment. It's not just make some funny, nice RT productions. It's more for resist and support and discover yourself, and you have a weapon to fight with, and all of that is theater. We lately after I mean I have a lot of things to say, so I will finish with this because I don't know where to go directions. We have many different levels, but lately we work with a new production. Finally, we got some support because, you know, Palestinian art network facing a new problems with the AU and the Swedish and all the foundations from West, because they put a new condition on our agreements that, you know, connecting to the Israelis. So like anyone have been in prison, anyone, whatever, not allowed to get any benefit from theater or culture, or even an audience cannot go in a performance if he had any issue, have been ex-prisoner or whatever with Israel. At the same time, Israeli have no any conditions in the same agreement. So it's just for Palestinians. And we didn't accept the funding this time. So for 2 years, we will lose all our funding from AU and the Swedish and all West funding. I'm happy for that. So maybe that will make us more strong and find a new alternative ways and become more revolutionary art movements, even AU and their support. So we got the British again. We come back to the British. We got a British funding to make a VR production, talk about the Palestinian artist struggle. Last year, I have been with an British director that we tried to meet Palestinian artists in different subjects, photography, circus, theater, dancers. And I, even as a Palestinian, I've been in shock when I hear these personal stories of artists in Palestine. They've been in prison, they've been shot, they've been broken, they've been crazy. And then we decide to make the Revolution Promise. It's a project, talk about the Palestinian artists and what the struggles they face. And we will make a VR that you can see this production everywhere in the world, meet all the artists, all the areas. And I hope you can be part of it, because we're gonna make an interviews and a text from all these artists and make it as a theater text. You can use it and express it as an artist in different fields. And we will, through this project, we will try to make and create an international artwork that this time we talk about the Palestinian artist struggle. Maybe in the future, we as an artist can talk about another artist or another theater problems, politically, socially, in different area. So in the whole world, we have a connection or art network that we share our struggles and we stand up for each other if any artist face any problem. So please be part of it. Send me your email and we can get in connect and be a part of this. And I will stop here because I don't know where I'm gonna go more. And I'm happy to listen to your questions.
Well, that was only 10 minutes. You still have another 2 days, 23 hours, and there'll be a time when we'll come to Palestine and do an atelier there, and then you can talk as much as you wish. But thank you very much, Ahmed. that was very passionate and very lively, and a very kind of I suppose concrete expression of passion in terms of how theatre can make a difference and stimulate people to think about things. So we'll come back and ask some questions around that. So thank you very much to each of you. It's been a really fantastic input from all of you around these subjects. Just from, I was going to say to Ahmed, it's very interesting that the British who caused all the trouble in Palestine and Israel, they are the people that are backing you in terms of making this movie that you're working on. So maybe that's decolonization with a difference. It's like the other day we were having a similar kind of debate down here in Cape Town with a friend who's a very passionate academic in the field of decolonization. And English is not his first language, but he has learned to speak English so well that even the people who speak English sometimes, are so intimidated by him. So in a way, what he's done is he's taken decolonization to the different kind of level where he's so learned the language of the colonizer that is now using it against them as part of the decolonization process, if you know what I mean. So interesting kind of concept. So maybe just to open up some of the discussion, Hooman, I wonder if I can maybe ask you a couple of questions. You were speaking about diversity leading to innovation, and I think that we would agree with that. But diversity leading to innovation can also be a bit of a trope, in the sense that it's a nice thing in terms of celebrating diversity. Diversity can also be an obstacle. For example, some of the things we've been speaking about, where differences are just so big that there's inertia, things don't happen. In fact, some of the examples that people have written in the applications that they sent to us, they were talking, for example, about how in some parts of a particular country, the way that women are viewed is very different to the way that they would have liked women to be viewed, in terms of integrating them into their projects and allowing them to come and have access to it and the like. So cultural differences sometimes might lead to innovation, but they can also be pretty major obstacles. How have you dealt with that? Or how are you dealing with that?
So it definitely, you have to be culturally aware when you start to work with people with different cultural backgrounds. It requires the cultural sensitivity, and having read into the differences of culture that there are, so the different cultural dimensions that exist, and the cultural backgrounds that come into play there, and preparing festival organizers, but also any artists, etc., that want to work with newcomers or other people with different cultural backgrounds, creating that awareness, creating also that academic background is necessary to start working with people. Because if you know what to deal with, what topics may come up, that will definitely help to take that into your process and make it so that you are not surprised. I think that's the biggest kind of the biggest thing that we'll work towards, to not to be surprised. But you will be surprised. Obviously, you can prepare as much as you like, you can read as many books as you like, but then if you work with people who you expect are, for instance, very religious, or who have a specific view about gender, and they don't, then you've done a lot of preparation for nothing. It's good to be prepared, and also to give you that feeling, and also create space for discussion. I think what you have to keep in mind is just that there needs to be a lot of interpersonal connection that you need to create with the people that you want to work with, especially if it's a bigger kind of topic. You need to be connected with people and have space to talk about topics that you find are interesting. You want to avoid inertia, you want to avoid getting stuck, but you do get stuck if your process is so focused in your own cultural context. So you need to create that space for discussion, you need to create that space for personal connection, because these are values that, especially in non-Western countries, are extremely important. The connection between people is much more important than the process, especially when I talk about the Dutch context. You know, it's so much more personal oriented, and there's so much more, there's such a lack of space. It's so goal oriented oftentimes, that is exactly the reason why we get stuck. And that's what we have to flip around. So again, to summarize, just to create space, to read into the cultures that you're going to work with, get that academic background a little bit, do some research, understand power distance, understand the roles and the religious contexts that are there, and then also to create space for discussion, create space for interpersonal connection. I think these are two really good ways to avoid getting stuck and avoid the barriers. But that's so much easier said than done, obviously, and there are millions of examples of how to do it right, and millions of ways how to get stuck. So it's just about, also, again, that might be the third point, just doing it and not thinking too much about it. That oftentimes is also just useful.
Yeah, I suppose it kind of goes to something I was going to ask Dijana about earlier, which is that when you are engaged in democracy or promoting human rights, sometimes the best way to do it is simply to practice it. Promoting something, promoting human rights, just exercise freedom of expression, and in that way you're pushing back against those who are wanting to basically limit it. But I just want to continue a little bit more with you, Hooman. Quite often when newcomers are coming into a dominant kind of culture, people in organizations such as yours tend to educate the newcomers about the society into which they are wanting to be integrated, and telling them how it is and so on. I wondered how much work is kind of done with the host country, where people who are the dominant culture are kind of being educated about the expectations of, so maybe speak a bit about that.
Right. Dominant culture, obviously, right? In brackets, in that sense. That's why I put so much emphasis in my opening remarks about meeting people on an eye-to-eye level. So that's where I want to start corporations to start out, not to go directly, like, I don't want to go and collect people and put them in front of the cultural makers and say, like, hey, here are people, make projects with them. The process that now really works, and it has completely changed this approach as well. And you are amazing at pointing out these very difficulties. I mean, you're very good at that, because a lot of people don't know that they exist. So that's very smart of you, Mike. So anyhow, what we do is I make sure that the cultural organizers get to, for instance, integration schools or camps, and they just give a presentation, or they just talk to people and try to connect with them on a personal level. That's something that I really stress. People will come to your festival or to your project, not because they know exactly what you're making, but it's because they trust you. It's because they connect with your story, with your passion, your energy. And that is the reason why they come. And then I asked them to give them a tour of your organization, give them a tour of the theater. I mean, for me, that's super interesting to see the backgrounds and to understand all the different workings of such an organization. And then to sit down with your team and to kind of have a speed date with the newcomers, just on an eye-to-eye level, just to connect as human beings, not as your struggles, your background, all of these different things. Just like, who are you? What is your drive? And what is my drive? What is my passion? Where can we find that overlap? And that is the best point to get rid of these whole different power structures, and to get rid of especially the assumptions and the feelings. This project is 80% feeling, 20% rational, maybe even 90%, I don't know. But there's so much feeling involved for cultural organizations before they start working with newcomers, because it's exciting, it's new, it's unexpected, so it's because you've never done it before. It can become stressful, and just meeting people and getting that human connection, getting that human trust is what makes it possible, I think.
Yeah, building relationships, that's ultimately what it's about. One of the reasons why I guess I get to ask these kinds of questions is because I live in South Africa, right? And we come from a history of there's so much division and so on. And one of the questions I was going to put to you as well, and it's something which other festivals might be dealing with in terms of the festivals that are represented here, particularly those that are trying to integrate newcomers into their festivals. So we've had particular festivals here, for example, that might have been particularly for white Afrikaans people, so people who have some kind of Dutch heritage, which is where you are based now. So in terms of the new kind of political imperatives, those festivals kind of need to be seen to be more integrating. They need to bring people who before they saw as enemies now into the festival. So the challenge to the festival organizers is how, on the one hand, to maintain their audiences and their markets who have really supported the festival and may given it its rationale, while at the same time now integrating new folk who may alienate the traditional audiences. How does one kind of manage that?
Wow. So that's something that is interesting to talk about, because these kinds of tensions are not as existent in the kind of cultural organizations that I work with. Naturally, in the Netherlands, we have very strong right-wing parties, and those people obviously have very strong opinions about newcomers. But what we've kind of done is, like, most of the time snuck people into the project. So I always go for the 10% rule, where when you have 500 volunteers, 50 of those need to be newcomers. That is significant enough to make it visible that the new people are working in your team, and also then to connect with people again on a very human level. So what I thought was very smart, what a lot of cultural organizations did, is that they put a Dutch and a newcomer in one team to then do a volunteer shift of 8 hours together. And if you have if you have to struggle through hardship together, if you're in the rain for 8 hours directing traffic and there's nobody else to talk to and you're in the middle of the forest somewhere, I mean, that's really where you start to be confronted with your ideology. We had this example of somebody who's from a strong right-wing party having to do exactly this volunteership with a newcomer, and just connecting with people and inviting him to his home to have dinner later that week, because it's the fear of the unknown that makes us scared of life, and it's the fear of it's that human connection again. It all boils down to that human connection to get over it. I think when it comes to audiences, it's a little bit different. We had a classical music festival that has a very strong 50, 60 plus wide audience that's connected to it. And they had as a theme, Arabian Nights, one in a thousand nights as a theme, melting pot as a theme. And what they did very smartly was they had on the last day of the festival a big buffet and round tables and people sitting, enjoying music, eating some foods, etc. And I thought what they did amazingly is that they had table settings where they put families together, but also made sure that there are always newcomers at those tables, which the guests didn't know about. But they all loved it. You know, they went through an experience together. Again, they had a shared experience. They had time for discussion, they had time for personal connection, and then it's starting to get boring because I'm giving the same answer to all of your questions, but that's the essence, a shared experience and room for personal connection. That's where you get to solve tensions. But I mean, this is so, again, context related. South Africa is something else than political tension for right-wing parties and newcomers in the Netherlands. There's more history, there's more personal experiences, more personal tragedies that connect to this. And that would be something, again, to look into at the context, at that specific situation, and trying to figure out the ways dealing with it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you answered the second question the way that you did, because for one moment I was thinking that basically your answer in terms of how do you deal with integration is to put people in hardship together, and through hardship they'll build relationships. So it was delightful to hear that they could also share a meal and basically build a relationship in that way.
But it's great if people have to experience something shitty together.
Sure.
You know, we had this one guy who was who we didn't have a volunteer spot for him, so what he did was he volunteered 2 weeks in the rain to set up the festival without getting the opportunity to actually experience the festival. Luckily he did, but he just got up every morning at 8, slept in a tent, worked with the construction for 8-9 hours in the rain, and then got to have dinner with them. And that they shared that shitty experience, and that made them connect really well together, because they could talk. When outsiders came, they would feel connected, because they would go, oh, you know, it was in a rain 8 hours and it is with this guy, and then they have that shared story. And I think that's what connects people really well, going through shitty experiences together as much as beautiful experiences. Sometimes the shitty things stay for us for a longer period of time. Sorry for the swearing.
No worries. And then having a drink together kind of cements it, right? So maybe Dijana, maybe moving on to you. So a theme that you picked up on is something which has kind of been with us in the last 2 days as well from other folk, about how increasingly political space is kind of being closed at the moment in our various countries. It's one of those ironies that, you know, with COVID and so on, it's almost given our different governments the right to take particular actions to be more restrictive within society than to open it up and to be more democratic and the like. I was wondering though, because you've kind of taken things online, is that a better space for you to be operating in, because that's kind of less restrictive politically at the moment?
In a way, yes, and in a way, no. I mean, it's less, let's say, technically speaking, it's less restrictive. But then it's limited because with whom you are really communicating. I mean, this is like people that are that you make a plan with to communicate. These are the people that are like us here. Like, okay, we are now just created a bit of the community around this festival academy. But then what about other people that are not now with us here, that are maybe if they see something on the streets or if they see something in the public space, by chance, they would be positively affected. So in that sense, yes, I mean, the restrictions are less. Our internet is not that under control. But I would say that this is also global problem, because still, even that internet is giving us this possibility to communicate across the borders, it also limits us. And I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying that we need to be aware of that circumstance.
Sure. But in your local struggles around democracy and human rights and the like, might having an international and global connection and audience not serve you? I'm kind of going back to what Ahmed was saying at the end of his talk, that by virtue of being globally connected and being in solidarity with each other, they are able to undertake their struggles because there's more international attention kind of focus on the situation. So sometimes the repressive regimes are less inclined to take action when they know that the world is watching.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what we learned very early 90s, because we were under embargo, and in Serbia specifically, and then Yugoslavia. And what it created was for the government to do whatever they wanted, because narrative was that the whole world isolated us and everyone were against us and so on. So what we understood from the beginning was importance of having international relationships, and not only that we would go there. I mean, in that times there was not like this kind of the virtual space that was so developed, but also, and I think it's still for today very important to bring people at the spot, to bring people to us. And so that was completely the changer of the game, because suddenly people like in Belgrade, for example, through the festivals we did, or activities we did, had a chance to see the face of the other. And as Hooman said, at the end, I think it's very important to share the stories. And of course, we can share the stories via internet, and we do that, and we should use it as the place for that. But there is, of course, something that could not be replaced with kind of the face-to-face sharing stories and going through the real experience. Beautiful story about like building the set 8 hours in the rain. So in that sense, but on the other hand, like as we were like labeled as being anti-government for decades, what really helped us a lot were international connections, and were it's notion that we knew that if something would be happening to us, that the international community would react. But I would say more than that was important really to create real relationships and to be able to bring people over or to go there.
Are LGBTI rights, are they illegal?
It's not there. I mean, there is a huge improvement. I mean, in the last years, thanks first of all to the incredible fight of the independent NGO organizations to fight for those rights. So they are not illegal, but still, like for example, now we started to talk. This is a huge step that it will be granted the possibility to have the same-sex marriages. So this is a huge step in our society, and maybe within the year we'll get a new law. There is a huge debate, a huge discussion, lots of people against and so on. So this is still very, let's say, in a way homophobic society, and lots of people are not understanding, I mean, really, what are the human rights in that realm. And even that legally people would not be prosecuted, would have legal protection and so on. If they would be demonstrating their right on the streets, it would be the problem. I mean, if we would have women kissing each other on the streets or two men, simply speaking, it would be a huge problem. So there is still a big way to go, but we witnessed and I witnessed how things could improve, and they did improve over the years. And I think greatly also in art interventions and to make the people more open and their minds more open to that.
So in some cases, the human rights are not issues to do with political repression so much in terms of coming from a government that is trying to repress. It also has to do with social taboos and cultural taboos. And that's where you're finding that you're kind of needing to educate the public about fundamental human rights in order to change perceptions. Yeah.
Exactly. So there is one trick there, speaking about government, specifically our government, because we desperately, Serbia wants to become the member of EU out of, and the official narrative is that we need to become the part of EU, not because of all rights, human rights and all this other stuff, but because of economy. And this is the problem, because the people are not getting the good message, like we need to become the part of EU because there is the practice and the set of the laws that protect the human rights and the people, and like about diversity and so on. But we have to accept all that as like something like a little bit unpleasant, but what we really want is economy. And this is why this narrative is creating this situation and basically invigorating taboos and cliches and so on. And this is where we come as artists, and the role of arts and culture is really great there, because it's really dealing and breaking taboos on the spot. And just to give you example from our festival, we presented the work of the artist Zoe Gudović, and she's a big activist, and also herself very openly advocating for LGBT rights, herself being openly lesbian and so on, which was a big deal here and so on. She created a great installation in the toilet, and so she calls it toilet art, where she invites people to come to toilet as her living room, and she's creating like really the space of intimacy and connection, love, speaking, and she's sharing a little bit of rakia, like candy, with people, and she is giving them cookies, and then it's like basically in a very kind of the personal space that is at the same time public, and exploring those taboos. And incredible, because 2 people at a time could enter because of COVID into like, it was like a little bit big of the toilets in the venue. And I asked her, Zoe, how did you come up with this idea to put the thing in the toilet? She said, I grew up in the realistic apartment, small apartments with two stores where maybe like 5 family were living together. And she said, I have 3 sisters, and the only intimacy I could have was toilet. And so I really love that kind of like how she made this kind of the link, her personal situation that was embedded in the social context. It was very important to speak about LGBT rights, but starting really example personal to political.
Ellada, what Dijana was talking about now is a nice segue into you, and that comes from Yusuf in the chat as well. Dijana was talking about how the government might be using, human rights or their so-called sympathy for human rights in order to access the economic benefits of being part of the EU. And what Yusuf is asking in the chat is, how can we measure festivals in terms of their social impact, and how authentic is that impact? Because could artists and festivals not simply be using the social dimension of what they do in order to access money for them to be able to do the artwork that they're doing?
Yeah. I think I'm going to start from the difficult part of the question, which is impact. So this is, I think that the arts and institutions in general, we are constantly on a kind of these short-term and mid-term crusades try to prove that our work has impact. Bringing it back to the type of institutions that we are kind of supporting, and the types of spaces that we're set. So running a, I would say, that is within a contested space where there are hegemonic narratives, where there are narratives by the state, by the administrations, that I think makes how you measure impact a little bit, differentiates it, because you do see it, you do understand it from different aspects. So just kind of to give you an example, and I also wanted to address a little bit this question of, how do you deal with topics? And so I wanted to tie it in with the fact that last year in 2019, we decided to bring the Buffer Fringe Festival back to the Buffer Fringe, and to kind of repoliticize it, and to also connecting a bit with what Dijana said, and to dare to ask like difficult questions. And the theme was, how do you define the buffer zone or a buffer zone? So we got responses from artists, and what we asked artists was, you guys need to come and set up interactive installations within the space, okay, within the buffer zone itself. So it was, I think, a bet by the Home for Cooperation and by the creative team and by the artists to see exactly what kind of impact this would have. So once you talk about interaction, interactive installations, loads of collaborations with universities and interdisciplinary work that was quite cutting edge, right? What you're attempting to do is to take something that is marginal, it's a marginal idea, right? To tell someone, you're not going to be watching a play tonight from 8 to 9:30. It's still, and like you were saying before, like still and very proper. You need to really shift your scope of what this experience will be, and go into the moat in the buffer zone between the two sides, which means you need to cross the checkpoints, meet and encounter artists or students or academics or groups of people, and interact with them. So last year, what we did, kind of our attempt to inquire, so what is this space? Can you come and experience what these artists are offering to you and tell us, right, what the space is? Or don't tell us, just kind of keep the experience. So last year, what we witnessed was quite a lot of people taking the leap and crossing the checkpoint and coming into the buffer zone and interacting with the artworks and speaking with the artists. So I think that venturing out into different types of methodologies, of opening up the scope of curation and not daring, at the end of the day, maybe we're just going full cycle and going back to a fiesta and going back to kind of meeting up in the village square and having different types of stalls. I don't think it's a daring move. It's at the end of the day, you are reopening those portals of communication between audience and artists, and trying to see and trying to measure how far you've gone and how much people are willing to risk to interact with you. And that is also a way to measure how far you've gone, potentially from being a marginal festival to going a little bit closer to the mainstream, right? So, we didn't have like 20,000 audience, but I think we had enough to understand that people were willing to push it a little bit. They were willing to extend what their experience would have been. And and it's great. And unless you risk it as an institution, you will never know. And the curation is something that kind of need to a little bit.
Well, what you actually is it's a whole lot less possible to evaluate impact in the kind of using the metrics that funders often give us, you know, tick a box, tick a box. It's about changing people's minds. It's changing the way that people think about particular things, and how do you measure that? You can't do it 3 months after your festival is done and you say, this is how many people's minds have changed. This is about a process. So it's an important question that Yusuf is asking, but it's something that we might need to deal with in terms of engaging with our funders who are keen on knowing what kind of impact is their funding having, because they need to obviously report to whoever gives them the money. Just in talking about funding, we're talking about the gaze and the need for decolonization, in the sense that not allowing those who provide the funding to determine the aesthetics of what it is that you're actually doing, but to have the freedom to be able to do what it is that you want to do. It's a very interesting question, though, because on the other hand, many of our artists who work within our particular context, I'm talking from South African experience, and I'm wondering if it kind of resonates with yours. Many people have this idea about decolonization, and yet in some ways, their sense of affirmation arises from how they will be viewed in the global north, in the West. Will they make it to London? Will their movie be selected for the Oscars? Kind of thing. How do we shift consciousness in terms of where we feel affirmed if we are so interested in decolonization, and at the same time there seems to be this contradiction in how we feel about our art outside of the Western canon? Yeah,
that's a huge question, and we've been discussing with Indian friends or friends from Ireland and Northern Ireland, obviously Palestinians, and you know, we in the post-conflict areas, we are, well, and in post-colonial overall, I'm not going to just say post-conflict, I think in post-colonial situations and in post-colonial conditions, there is really a need for us to have like an internal dialogue that is more honest internally, to start to recognize the different mechanisms that happen within our communities, to start to reconcile with you know, the larger demons within our narratives, things like, how do we deal with nostalgia? How do we perceive our past? How do we select the parts of our past that are convenient, some our funders, right? And for our Western, for our, let's just say, our global northern partners, I think it does take a certain amount of maturity within kind of cultural frameworks within communities to be able to make that type of progress. I mean, in Cyprus, let's just say we're not the carrying the flag on this one. We are still, to a very large extent, associated with what we perceive to be our motherlands and obviously our British colonial past. There's a lot of syndromes that really do haunt our cultural production that have to do with how we have vilified what we choose to tag as folklore. There's a very clear distinction between high and low art. There's just a lot to unpack. We are in a gradual process of trying to unpack these, and to also be very honest about, okay, when we're curating a festival, what kinds of voices not matter, because all voices matter, but what kinds of voices should we credit, right, with carrying something new, with carrying a new voice, so that we can unpack these things further. It's a process, Mike. It really is. But it's wonderful to be in this context, to be able to discuss it.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, that's what these platforms allow, to bring people from these different contexts to have these conversations. So, exactly. So thank you, Atelier, for facilitating this. Ahmed, can we come to you? Sorry to wake you up, but so yesterday there was a bit of a discussion about you know, the instrumentalization of the arts, and is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And I was wondering, obviously, in terms of where you're coming from and the passion with which you spoke about resistance and the arts, I take it that that is a non-passion for you. For you, art is about resistance. So in your view, is the discussion about the instrumentalization of the arts, is that for societies that, is it a luxury in your particular context? In other words, is it a global north discussion? Because in contexts where there is quite severe repression and so on, that to talk about the instrumentalization of the arts is kind of a non-issue?
You know, I hope I got to the question very clear. I think it's sometimes I get confused when people ask me, are you doing a political theater or art is a political? It's for me, it's like how art cannot be political. I just cannot get it. And even many artists thinking like, and ask me how we make a political theater, how we make art political. Like, is this a question? Our life, it's political. Everything in this world is political. You think Europe give money for everybody, for festivals, because they just like art? For sure, there is always political issues that they need to improve in the floor. They need to change. They colonize us by money. And I think artists have to start to think about new ways, how to fund our work, how to make a private, let's say, factories that can bring us money, and then we discuss and we talk about the cases in the way we want, in the way we should talk about. Especially also in Palestine, you could see how many NGOs in the world exist in Palestine, which makes the work of the artist in Palestine very difficult. You should be following a particular, let's say, foundation or politics of a country so they can support you and support your work. And I think it's a question for artists. Are you really doing your work for the money, or you work because you believe and you feel that you have something to say, you have something to change? Identity of your work is very important. You cannot think to be a leader to do work. You have to work, change, ask, do everything you can, and then your improvements you will bring you as a leader for what you believe your work have to talk about. And for sure, especially in this case of Palestine, where you have a PA, like your authority, it's collaborating with everybody to, because of the money, of the supporters. Even now we have elections in Palestine, not because we believe in freedom and we believe in differences and we believe in election, because the government of US told our let's say president, you have to have elections so we can continue our support for your case. And I think I cannot believe and I cannot imagine any artist do not really mix himself with the community, with the political cases, with the freedom of the expression, with the rights, with many different colonization in your society, not fight and not express all these cases. For me, if you want to be an artist, just to be an artist that he do art for art, I will see you in the moon, or when I die after some years, tell me what you have been done. Are you comfortable with your achievements? But you are an artist, you are a soldier, you are responsible. That's the first thing we teach our students. Theater artist is a responsibility. You are the only different eye can see what is going on in your society, on the country, in the politics, on every side in your life. You are the only different eye can express and talk and show people what is reality in artistic way. So I think we all have to, in the end, get to the responsibility, and your festival or your work or your founders or the foundation that support you is really believing in what you do, or wants to change you and makes you as a tool, as an artist tool working for outside policy.
That's completely understandable in the context of a place like Palestine. But at the same time, as you're working in a place like Palestine, is there at times the temptation for artists to be aligned with particular political entities? In other words, where they think the Palestinian Authority, we better, support them, or today we're supporting Hamas because that's where our come from. What is your position on political alignment as an artist?
Exactly. That's what it comes in this year when we talk. Many artists now talks about we should gather as an artist and we should be in the parliament, and maybe we choose one or two that they can present the art and the artist and the activist and the culture scene in the political scene. But my friend, we are very, very far away from this picture. We are very far away that even Palestinian community or Palestinian politics accept it's normal to have theater in Palestine. It's normal to have an actor or an actress. We still face the problem of women cannot be in theater, cannot be in the art scene. We still deal with, you cannot mix children in the workshop of children. We still face these problems, and you tell me, are you able to be in the political scene? For sure not. For sure they don't want an artist became in the face, became in the front scene, because we have a freedom. We have freedom, and we have the courage to talk about all the problems. We in the Freedom Theater, before we talk about all of this, we ask for the individual freedom. We cannot ask for the whole freedom if our children, our women, our young people do not know what is freedom. They don't test it. We have to have the individual freedom, and then Mahmoud Abbas can ask for the freedom of Palestine. We as a Freedom Theater, we believe we have many different occupations from our society, our culture, the BA, and then the Israeli army. Today, the Israeli army do not need to come with the tanks to the Palestinian territories. Now we're facing a very crazy drugs in the community of the Palestinians, where drugs, cheap chemical, make the young Palestinians sick. They don't care about freedom. They don't care about elections. They don't know what the hell is the theater. They don't know what the hell is politics. And now we're facing a bigger two issues that also Freedom Theater, we try to connect with this international cases so we can present our story as a Palestinians. We're facing a real serious problem with mental health in Palestine, in young people. It's a very crazy case that even Palestinians not aware of that case, but we try to include our work now with mental health. Again, with the climate change, we as a Palestinian, we're really facing a future problem with a climate change, and all that is because also we have occupation that we are not programmed or planned to face this kind of problems. Even for a vaccine for the COVID, now the Israelis not allowed the vaccine come to Palestine, to Palestinians. It's, I mean, you see, and then you talk about artists and how you can be artist in the middle of this kind of situation, how you can not be part of your political community scene in this kind of situation. I hope I will be in Cyprus or in Belgium, sitting in some place, thinking about an artistic idea that I will work on. But no, my friend, we are in totally different scale. You are in the middle between community, politics, problems, money, and as an artist, you have all this pressure to stand up, you fight, and you can imagine our artistic director being killed, shot in front of the theater. For me, it's enough to tell you we're doing something that not everybody is liking. And for me, that's what I want to tell artists. Please, if people like your work, it's okay. I mean, okay, that's what we want. But look for things that people will not like what you say, what you do. You have to challenge them. You have to provoke them, from the funders until the normal person.
In fact, I was going to ask you, have those responsible for Giuliano's assassination been found yet?
For sure not. You can look for the history. Najil Ali is a caricature drawer, an artist in Palestine, gets assassinated in London, and nobody even been talking about who killed him. But for sure, in the end, it's the Mossad, the Shabak, the Israeli intelligence. Look at Ghassan Kanafani, the most important writer in the Palestinian history. He also get bombed in Lebanon. Many activists in Gaza being killed and just tanks pass on. Giuliano, when he came about to say that we need to make a third intifada with the artistic cultural tools, that we're gonna use YouTube, music, ballet, dance, theater, poetry to fight. And then for sure the Israelis and anyone else don't want the art and culture take a lead. They want us to silence this kind of work, but we believe in the end it's an occupation. It's the rules of the occupation in the floor, and that's what I am mentioning of the founders, especially for artists, especially for political artists. You have to be careful how to use the money from your founders. Your founders, they do not give you money because they like the color of your eyes, because they have a political things that they work on, and you have to be responsible as an artist how you want to use your money and how you want to employ the rules of the founders on your project.
Just maybe a final question. It's a very big question, so you don't have to answer it immediately or in a big way, but from Nikolai. What is the purpose of the revolution that you spoke about, and do you see a state of Palestine on the horizon? In other words, how long are you going to have to fight for, or can Belgium offer you a 3-month residency to work on an art project?
It is for me.
Yes, it is for you. What is the purpose of the revolution that you spoke about, and do you see a state of Palestine on the horizon? In other words, are you always going to be fighting for the rest of your life?
Exactly. My friend, I also talk about the responsibility of the artists in the world. We have to fight for the humanity, not for Palestinians or East Europe or West Europe. We have to fight for the human as a human. We all believe in that. At the same time, we in the Freedom Theater, we're not fighting to have Palestine as a border or as a flag. We are against these colors. We are against the borders. We are against the flags. We are against of the word of nationalism, because that's what political people want us always to be busy with. Nationalism, my border, my color, your visa. You are African, you are Middle East, you are European, you have a visa, your passport is red, you cannot travel. Your passport is not red. We believe the revolution bring us to be equal in all sides, equal with everything. And then I don't care. You call it Israel, Palestine, you call it South Africa too, you call it Belgium, Brussels, Palestine. I don't care. What I care of equality, that people can be in equal situation. They can go to the sea, they can plan their next year, they can enjoy with their children, they can make theater. I don't care of the colors. I don't care who's my neighbor. He's Swedish, he's Norwegian, he's Afghanistani, he's Pakistani, he's Jewish, he's a Christian. I don't care. We care of equal things, and that's what we all have to fight, because it's also a matter of artists and responsibility, how we share our vision for people, that we all have to be equal and just take out the borders, take out the flags, and take out names and differences, and let's live and enjoy our life. It's very short. I know it looks like a romantic dream, but no, for me, it's not romantic. I live in it. I practice in it.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. It was great to have your passion here. There's another question in the chat that I maybe wanted to float with Hooman. Just, do you work with experts who deal with the personal problems, like psychologists and social workers? And I think that that's an important question. Quite often, we as artists are called upon to deal with all of these major issues, and we kind of almost assume to be social workers, to be people who have expertise in these areas. Just maybe talk a little bit about that. Each of you can speak to that as you wish.
Sure. I'm in touch with psychologists and social workers because as a role, if I do observe anybody or any behavior that I would find, because I'm not a trained psychologist or social worker, I have a management background, touches on psychology, but if I see anything where I would be doubting, is that something that we need to address, then I would provide a signal and transfer people there. I think in 2019 we've worked with more than 1,000 newcomers, and let me think, since 2017 I've been doing this project. I've never had to signal to any of my psychology or social worker colleagues, anybody that I felt was in need of that kind of support. And here's the reason why. We always let people sign up themselves. So newcomers need to sign up themselves for activities or cultural activities in any sense, because that is the perfect litmus test to check whether somebody is ready to go and engage with a program. If you volunteer, we explain that you're going to volunteer, that you're going to go on a boat and that you're going to go to an island, or that it's a literary festival in your city that's 5 minutes cycling from where you live. We explain that. We put a form online, you just fill it in with your name, and just the psychological test that kind of filling in a form involves makes it so that people only will participate that are ready to participate. We don't work with third parties that kind of refer newcomers because they have their own agenda, they have their own ideas and agendas. And also they sometimes with good intentions, people try to push people to get to the comfort zone, which sometimes isn't a comfort zone. It's a protective zone for themselves because they're still busy dealing with traumas, or they're still busy dealing with personal issues. So in a role as cultural organizations and as artists, we shouldn't be working with people who are still in traumatic or in stressful situations, because that environment, so I'm not talking about the program, because I think programs can be very helpful working for traumatic experience, etc. But the environment that you put people in is very, very stressful. It's very colorful, it's very bright, there's a lot, and that can be a trigger for traumas or for any other kinds of things. Again, it's good to have people in your network. There's never been a need for me to advise colleagues that you need to have a psychologist or social worker on hand, or that you need to save somebody's phone number just in case something happens, because there's never been an instance where this was necessary, working with more than, I think, 1,000 people from any country you can imagine, any age, any gender. I think in 2018, I've sent one guy home because he really wasn't ready for the environment. And that was because somebody else had pushed him to fill in the form and like tried to, with good intentions, try to get him to try something new, but he himself wasn't ready for it. But I mean, numbers speak for themselves, and again, context plays into matter here. Sometimes we don't have the luxury, right? Sometimes a lot of people that we want to work with are still going through the things, and then arts and culture can be a great way to work for those things, but that's up to the artist to decide and to build personal connections. Yeah, full stop.
Yeah, I was going to say, so many people who are newcomers come with so much trauma.
Yeah, but they also come with a lot of resilience, you know.
Sure.
That's I mean, that's what,
exactly.
Those are the most resilient people that you can have in your organization, because they traveled through, you know, several continents to get where they are, and then I'm asked whether they need a buddy to show them around the festival. You know, it's beautiful, but it's not necessary.
Well, maybe that's why you were recommending earlier that people need to go through hardship. in order for them not
well,
just
you know, not the kind of hard to newcomers go through. I mean, I'm not going to put people on boats, but that was insensitive. No, that was insensitive. Yeah.
No. Okay, so maybe we're coming to the end of this. We have about 5 left or so, and I just wanted to maybe end by asking each of you to just say something around a question that that Ahmed raised and that kind of resonates with a lot of the participants in the atelier, in that many people are facing real challenges with sustainability, with funding of the festivals. So many people are needing to apply for funding. Quite often people are applying for funding from outside of their country, so they are dependent upon international funding to do their work. And yet that funding quite often comes with strings attached, like if you were in an Israeli prison, then you're not eligible for funding, for example. Obviously, Ahmed has taken a particular kind of stance in relation to that, but how do you and how have you negotiated that? How do you ensure that what it is that you believe in continues and is sustained within the challenge of having to find funding to sustain that funding is not available in your own country? Ellada, can we maybe start with you?
Maybe I have a different point of view for this because I really born in a Jenin camp under occupation, seeing the soldiers. I cannot see, like I cannot think in different way. For me, it's about dignity, freedom, and is this represent you and you want to change your fact, or you want to stay all your life and your children and the generation is coming under occupation. For me, if I think about old times, the artist always been poor. The artist always die without nobody know them. The artist always do everything, and 100 years later, people start to hear about them. Today, I know that the system that we go through, that we need to pay our internet, we need to pay our apartments and our bills, that makes us prisoners. And I believe we all need money. I believe we all need place to stay and internet, but it's really how much you believe in the thing you do. And I think in Palestine especially, if we want to change, if we want to do something different, we have to stop accepting funding from outside. We have to create our own funding. We have to create our own system plan to do our work without getting money from outside, because the money from outside, all what it's doing corruption, more occupation, division, just a lack of time going. In our case, we took from outside, but we did not exactly do what the founder do. We get the money and we do it in different way. We lie at them. They don't know even what they did. And the report, it's totally different. The report, it's totally have nothing to do with what the project we did. We take the money and we do something else. But as a Palestinian, I believe NGOs and funding is the first problem that the country, politics, community face, and we should create our own funding to do that. And I myself believe that if I believe in the theater, I will stay in the theater, continue what I believe in without money. I know it looks, again, a romantic idea, but think about it. You want to be a prisoner for your life and your children and your generation, or to make a new platform that you really do an art-free work for everybody.
Okay, so we've got just a few minutes left. Does anybody want to respond to that question or anything else you've heard? Dijana, Ellada, Hooman, any final thoughts before we bring the panel to an end? Yeah, Dijana?
There are so many important issues that were raised here, but also related to the funding. I think I agree with Ahmed totally that we need to believe in what we do. And if you really believe and if you have the need, then you will find you will somehow find a way to even find the funding in almost impossible circumstances. And yes, it does sound utopistic and romantic, but this is what we do. We create utopias. We create impossible spaces. And I would say that this is, Ellada mentioned risk, and we simply need to risk. We need to create despite the current topics, despite the current ways, if we need to, and stay alive, again, as Ahmed would say. So I would say we need to find the balance between risk and staying alive, and this is possible.
And on a last remark, oh, sorry, no, go ahead, Ellada, please. No.
Okay. All right, I just wanted to add one word into the mix, and that word is dignity. So when it comes to also thinking about funding and how it is that we maintain festivals and how it is that we think about the future and our sustainability, we need to also make sure that we take care of artists, and that yes, it's absolutely wonderful to, we all have our drive and we're all here because God knows none of us is going to, kind of to die a billionaire. But to be able to, sorry, Mike, I wasn't talking about you. It's the rest of us. No, but kind of to remember that as institutions, we do have that obligation to be able to maneuver our fundraising where that we all also kind of walk the walk, and we don't just kind of talk about our ethical basis, but we also do fundraising as to the best of our abilities so that we can offer our artists and our environment the type of dignity that I think that they deserve. Otherwise, we can totally be like lone riders, absolutely. But I think as institutions, we have a certain amount of obligation.
Great, thank you. Hooman.
Yeah, it's just lastly, last Atelier I joined here from the amazing Festival Academy. Julian Koymans was here, and he, from Culture Escapes, spoke about his way of financing projects in foreign countries, sometimes with like governments that aren't very much open to culture, and getting a kind of blank check from them to execute this program without them knowing what the content is going to be. So I think if anybody is able to give advice on that topic, I'd look to him, and maybe we can share his email address or his contact info if we email Inge. I'm sure we can figure that out, because he had a really great presentation about that, and I felt that was a really cool way of getting international projects financed, but also building a relationship with governments for them to give you a blank check, which is something unheard of in my experience. So.
Yeah, I was going to say as well at this, that maybe what we need to do, obviously the Atelier brings us together, we share these ideas and we're very passionate about them, but maybe we need to set up something that goes beyond the Atelier. How do we make solidarity something which really happens in practice? And maybe the idea of raising funding and doing things for ourselves to make us more independent, to allow us to pursue our art with greater authenticity and integrity and greater exercise of freedom of expression. Those are the kinds of things that we need to be sharing ideas about. I mean, we are doing something around that in South Africa, and we started something called the Sustaining Theatre and Dance Initiative, where we as people within the dance and theatre sector have decided, forget about government, forget about everyone else, we're going to find a way of doing it ourselves. And insofar as we can do it ourselves, we are going to take responsibility care for our sector, because no one else is going to. And if they do, they're going to place all kinds of parameters on what it is that we need to do. So very happy to share some of those ideas that we are beginning to develop through this process, but maybe to have this kind of continue beyond Sunday for those people who are interested to continue to have these kinds of discussions and then sharing them at the next Atelier. This is the point at which I say thank you to our fantastic panelists. It's been so stimulating, so interesting, so passionate. Thank you. And to hand back to Inge.
Thank you, Mike. And I totally agree, though I'm very disappointed that I will not die a billionaire. Thank you to our technical crew who managed this live stream. Also, thank you for Mike for fantastic facilitation of this fantastic panel. And thank you to the audiences who have been watching. So what happens now is that we have time for a quick one-on-one.